Hi, everyone. Welcome to our channel panel. Douglas Macgregor remarks, I've encountered significant challenges, and it's been quite conspicuous. Those typically critical have been actively seeking to criticize. He expressed concerns over the situation, indicating a lack of clarity. The Secretary of Defense holds a significant position akin to a deputy commander-in-chief in close proximity to the president. There seems to be confusion regarding the authority in the chairman of the Joint Chiefs versus that of the Secretary of Defense, with the latter holding broader powers, as outlined in Title X. Regarding recent events involving Lloyd Austin, he hopes for Austin's recovery, suggesting there may be more to the story than meets the eye. Speculation arises about who else in the White House may have been aware of the situation, positing that the National Security Advisor and other National Security Council staff might have had knowledge. But despite reservations about Austin, his voiced concerns about military overreach are noted, though the extent of his influence remains uncertain. Lingering distrust and contempt for Russia among some individuals are highlighted, which is deemed counterproductive. Concerns about President Biden's varying statements are attributed to his age and mental state. Separate one issue from the other. This individual has garnered support, including monetary assistance from various influential donors, with the Israel lobby being just one of them. Historically, he is aligned with the interests of his donors, so his recent remarks on Israel don't diverge from his past positions. On the subject of Russia, he might be stuck in a Cold War mentality or simply adopting a stance favored by his donors. I don't hold politicians in high regard, to be frank. Regarding Israel, tensions persist with strong determination to advance Israeli interests, encompassing the West Bank and Gaza. While I see little benefit for Israel in this approach, others, including their supporters, hold a different view. The risk is that escalation may spiral out of control with no signs of de-escalation in Washington or Jerusalem. The ongoing conflict poses a significant threat, especially considering Israel's inability to simply walk away like we can. The region is inflamed, and underestimating the populace's anger would be a grave error. Failure to confront this aggression may lead to political upheaval. Certainly, I'm referring to Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Iraq. They all recognize the possibility of facing removal unless they shift away from alignment with Israel and move towards a growing regional alliance against Israel. There's a contentious debate at the highest levels in Egypt regarding this matter. Many view recognition of Israel as an act of war that Egypt must oppose. However, Sisi, ultimately seen as aligned with us, is perceived by many Egyptians as both an Israeli and American puppet. The prevailing belief is that he will capitulate and accommodate Israel, but if he does, his tenure in office may be short-lived. There's a significant segment in Egypt determined to address what they perceive as injustices in Gaza, even if it means risking everything for war. This underscores the importance for elites to consider their actions carefully. Unlike in the past, where we could often bribe or bully populations in the region are less tolerant, the elites seek to maintain power, influence, and wealth, but they face tough decisions. If General Sisi simply acquiesces, claiming he has no choice, I doubt he'll remain in power for long. Sources in Israel cited figures suggesting that around 96,000 people reside along the northern border where recent exchanges of gunfire have occurred. However, whether it's 96,000 or a total of approximately 250,000, including Israeli residents in the area, the precise number is not the critical issue. It's evident that this situation is unsustainable for Israel in the long term. Prime Minister Mr. Netanyahu and his cabinet understand this reality. Yet they perceive the current circumstances as a rare opportunity, perhaps once in 50 years, to realize the vision of a greater Israel. The overwhelming majority of the Israeli population, as indicated by polling data, supports this course of action. Consequently, there's a growing inclination to confront Hezbollah, especially following what many perceive as a failed operation in Gaza. This inclination aims to divert public attention away from Gaza's issues, however. Many within the Israeli military recognize that engaging Hezbollah would demand significant resources and could lead to substantial losses. There's uncertainty about how the American public would respond if the U.S. were to support Israel militarily in such a conflict. While some might endorse such action, many would raise legitimate concerns about the lack of a clear strategy and the potential consequences. Additionally, Israel is under pressure to act swiftly due to the nature of its citizens, a soldier force, which cannot sustain prolonged military engagements. Despite these considerations, the dynamics of conflict often lead to escalation without clear off-ramps, leaving Israel in a precarious position. In military circles in Washington, the prevailing belief is that engaging in a two-front war would overwhelm the IDF Israeli Defense Forces. However, there's a notion that if Israel concentrates its forces around Gaza solely for containment purposes while sustaining aerial pressure through relentless bombings, it might free up enough IDF resources to confront Hezbollah effectively. This strategy heavily relies on U.S. support, as Israel is unlikely to engage Hezbollah without substantial backing. The situation in Lebanon and Syria is complex, with Russian air defense systems potentially altering the dynamics. Hezbollah possesses significant missile capabilities and experienced fighters, making them a formidable adversary. Israel's recent strikes in the region have disrupted commercial shipping routes, indicating that efforts to deter Hezbollah have not been successful. Given Hezbollah's resilience and history of enduring conflicts, they are likely to remain a persistent challenge for regional stability. Diego Garcia is there, but that's quite a distance from the region we're talking about. And then you have Djibouti. You have to look at the naval installations that are available where you could reload ammunition, particularly missiles where you can get to support if we need new engines, new propulsion, whatever it turns out to be. I don't know the answers to those questions. I rather suspect it's pretty tough if we've had trouble, and I know we have. Sustaining a combat or a carrier battle group in the eastern Mediterranean, I would think we'd have even more trouble sustaining a permanent naval presence off the coast of Yemen in the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea. Well, the problem with President Biden is that he sets out certain red lines. He makes statements, and over time, he evolves beyond those statements. What I'm talking about is the statements he made early on during the Ukraine proxy war that he was going to not send specific types of equipment or technologies to Ukraine because that would result potentially in World War II, and he talked specifically about cruise missiles. Initially, that statement was made about rocket artillery. He wasn't going to send any U.S. forces on the ground to Ukraine, but we know we've had something in the vicinity of 4,000 to 500 men killed on the ground in Ukraine. Now, they may not have been wearing a uniform, but they were there and they were killed. Maybe they were contractors or temporarily assigned as contractors. So he's backed off several times and done what he said he would never do. My concern right now is the same thing could happen with Iran. He allegedly sent a message to Iran about the Houthis, which I found laughable. There doesn't seem to be any understanding that the Houthis are not Iranians. They're Arabs. And just like the Arab militias in Iraq, they are committed to fight, all alongside Hamas and the Palestinians in Gaza and on the West Bank. And they are trying to do as much damage as they can against us, in the hopes that we will leverage our power to push the Israelis back and away from Gaza. Well, we're not going to do that. So I think that's something everybody misses it. It wouldn't matter whether the principal, Ayatollah. Stop. They're Arabs, and we can't lose sight of that identity. Battle damage assessment is an art, not a science. People look at what airstrikes, missile strikes have achieved on the ground. They often reach different conclusions. Admittedly, a lot of battle damage assessment involves wishful thinking. Remember, the air forces, not just the naval forces, but the air forces are very, very sensitive to what comes back as battle damage assessment. If the Air Force is part of it, then the operation has to be successful. I'm sure naval air feels very similar feeling, so I don't place a great deal of stock in battle damage assessment. My point is that I don't think they were very effective. If they were, I don't think the Houthis would have already launched strikes against another commercial vessel, and I think they'll launch strikes against our naval vessels if they think they can do damage now. Fortunately, they're using old technology, but it's still problematic enough that it's caused enormous trouble for the world's commerce, and that's the principal concern. This thing disrupts supply chain, things that stops access to critical minerals and resources. It's bad news. Why didn't someone talk to the Houthis? Whatever you may think of them, whatever you don't like about them, why don't we talk to them? We don't do that. We are not interested in talking. We want to bully people into submission. I don't think that's going to work with Houthis. I think so. I think that could be catastrophic for us. There's a lot of emoting, and remember, these people are all owned by someone else with lots of money. They don't. They don't take up a cause without being boosted in the effort with lots of cash because they're ultimately interested in staying in office.